Okay, I'm getting a message, Ben, that says the meeting is now streaming live. Is that correct?
The loading bar is going and we should be good. It's just firing up here. Perfect.
Are we there? Great, Ben. Thank you. I am State Senator Mark Lawrence. I'm the Senate Chair of the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee. With me are 11 of our committee members. We hope to be joined later by another 2, and as well as Garrett Corbin from the PUC, who's going to be presenting to us today. I'm just going to ask the committee members to go around and introduce themselves. And I'm just looking at my screen. I hope you have the same layout that I do, but I'm going to start off with Senator Trey Stewart and go from left to right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm State Senator Trey Stewart, representing District 2, Southern Aroostook and Northern Penobscot counties.
Barb, are you next?
I think everybody's setup is a little bit different. I'm Representative Barbara Wood. I represent House District 38, which is the western end of the peninsula in Portland.
And then Nicole?
Thank you. Good morning. Representative Nicole Grahowski. I represent the people of Ellsworth and Trenton. And if you have any trouble remembering how to pronounce my last name, it's 3 words you know, Grahowski. Thank you.
And Seth?
Good morning again, Seth Berry, and I represent House District 55, which is Bodenham, almost all of Richmond, and beautiful Swan Island on the Kennebec. Great to be with you. And I'm the House Chair.
Nate?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Nate Wadsworth. Nice to see everybody virtually. I represent District 70, Hiram, Porter, Brownfield, Freiburg, and Lovell.
And Paige?
Good morning. I'm Representative Paige Ziegler, and I represent District 96, the 7 towns of Belmont, Liberty, Lincolnville, Montville, Morrill, Palermo, and Searsmont, the most pleasant people in the state of Maine.
Chris?
Good morning. I'm Representative Chris Kessler, representing District 32, which is the middle portion of South Portland and a little smidgen of Cape Elizabeth.
And Scott?
Good morning. My name is Scott Cuddy. I represent House District 98, which is Frankfort, Searsport, Swanville, and Winterport.
And Steve?
Good morning. I'm Steve Foster, representing District 104, which includes the towns of Dexter, Garland, Charleston, Stetson, and Exeter.
And Nathan?
Thank you. I'm Nathan Carlo. I represent House District 16, which is part of Buxton and all of Hollis.
Great. And not with us this morning, Representative Grignon and Senator Vitelli. We hope they'll be joining us later. This is a committee orientation. It's generally done at the start of each legislative session to refresh the memory of returning members who served on the committee before, and to help new members understand the issues and kind of the structure of the committee. Energy, Utilities, and Technology is a very complex committee. We study very complex areas that are very intricate. And so we're planning this year to spend a lot of time in the orientation, getting up to speed, understanding for the new members, understanding the organizations and groups and individuals that come before us, and also the for the returning members, kind of what has changed in the interim as we have left the legislature. We have 3 new members? We have Senator Stewart is brand new to the committee. Representative Carlo is brand new to the committee. Senator Vitelli, who's joining us, is brand new to the committee. And Representative Cuddy is brand new to the committee. I believe Representative Ziegler, you're also brand new to the committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And Representative Wood.
And Representative Wood, thank you, is also new. So we have 5 new members, and Representative Wadsworth is returning to the committee after having been on it previously. So we now have, I believe, 12 of our members on the committee, and I'll ask Senator Vitelli just to introduce herself.
Senator Vitelli, you're muted.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Great.
Good. Thank you. Good morning, Senator, Representative Berry. I'm Eloise Vitelli. I represent District 23, which is all of Saginaw County and the town of Dresden in Lincoln County, and I'm delighted to be part of this committee.
Welcome.
Welcome.
So this orientation today, we're first going to have an orientation from committee staff, the committee clerk, and the 2 legislative analysts. We're going to have a discussion of committee rules, policy, and other committee matters. We're going to take a short 15-minute break, and then we're going to begin presentations first from the PUC. And this is a technology, I think when we did our test meeting, we kind of went over it, but this technology is different than what we're going to use for hearings. So now we're kind of working through this to make sure this format works fine for us. This is an informational hearing, so only those who we've invited to present will be allowed to participate, but the public will be watching it live, and obviously it will be recorded. So with that, I'm going to simply turn it over to our committee clerk, who can talk to us about the Legislative Information Office resources and kind of what's going to be available to our committee. Our committee clerk is Ben Freck, who previously was a committee clerk on EUT, has worked in a variety of offices around the State House, and we're very lucky to have him this year. Ben?
Thank you, Senator. Real quick, just Legislative Information Office is kind of the behind the scenes and facilitates all the paperwork and technological aspects of the day-to-day in committee. As Senator Lawrence has said, I previously clerked for EUT and also HHS in the 126th. Seems like a long time ago. Just a couple things to go over while we have most everybody. If you could, I'll probably send out an email after our meeting with Deirdre and Dan CC'd, and we'll just ask for everyone's best contact information. If you have a non-legislative email, I know the legislature prefers your legislative email, but if the best way to get in touch with you is a different email, send that along, and the best cell phone in case, we hit a snag in meeting, or myself or the chairs or the analysts need to reach out to you at another time. We kind of already went over the live streaming. The live streaming will be treated basically like the gavel. Right before the chairs start the meeting, we'll fire it up, and as soon as the meeting's adjourned, we will shut it down. You can still use the room to, chat with people afterwards, and I won't end the meeting until everybody's all through. Another thing about this different session is if you are ever in the building for a meeting for some reason, let me know. It just changes how we take attendance, but if not, I will just assume everyone is doing it from home or not Augusta. And the last thing is I know that some of you may have internet issues. To cut video will help, but if we are ever voting on anything like a confirmation hearing or a bill itself, you need to be seen and heard to record your vote. And that's something we've been told. So I will probably have to remind myself and you, but we will do the best we can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And this year, there's a little bit of a different setup than has been in prior legislative sessions. The Office of Policy and Legal Analysis has essentially double-teamed committees with 2 analysts assigned to 2 different committees, so that if one of them happens to be out or if has to quarantine or anything like that, we have a backup analyst. And I think they've worked out between them when they're going to be working on a committee and which types of issues they're going to be dealing with. But we have two analysts, Deirdre Snyder, who's rejoining the committee, EUT, after serving as the analyst in the past, and Dan Tartikoff, who is the analyst for the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which often has similar and interrelated issues with us. So I'll turn it over to Deirdre first to talk about OPLA, and we'll have Dan join in and introduce himself after that. Deirdre?
So as Senator Lawrence said, I'm Deirdre Schneider. Like he also said, Dan and I will be co-staffing EUT this session. I'll be the primary contact person for sort of any kind of EUT related questions of the members. I'll be doing the scheduling with the chairs, but Dan and I will be splitting up the bills, and we haven't quite figured that out yet. Exactly how we're going to do. We're sort of going to figure it out as we go along. I've been with the legislature since 2014. I did staff EUT for 4 years of that time, so I'm coming back after 2 years off. And I've also staffed quite a few other committees and worked with a lot of you on those different committees. Before I get into sort of the office overview and our services and what we can provide, I'll just let Dan introduce himself briefly, and then I'll get into the rest of the information.
Sure. Hi, I'm Dan Tartikoff. I'm also with OPLA. Deirdre and I actually started a day apart in 2014, and she's moved around quite a bit in terms of staffing, but I have largely stayed put with the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. This will be my 8th session staffing ENR, and I'm also going to be working on EUT. I've done a little work over those, I guess, 6 or 7 years with the Criminal Justice Committee, the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee, and I was one of the staff for the Joint Select Committee on Marijuana Legalization Implementation a couple years ago. So some experience dealing with adult use marijuana issues. Excited to learn something new and maybe pick up on some old stuff that I've learned while in ENR that's related.
So as many of you know, this session will be mostly paperless. Committee-related materials we posted on the web. I've sent a link to that information to members, but I figured because your email inboxes are probably inundated, I'll just show you quickly. I'm going to share the screen, sort of how to navigate to that page if you're in a crunch, and I'm also going to highlight some of the documents that are there. So let's see if this works well. All right, so if you're on the legislature's homepage, along the top, there's a bars. You're going to go to the committee bar, drop down that legislative committee, select that. When you get to this screen, you'll select the Energy, Utilities, Technology Committee, obviously. And on that homepage, there's a committee materials link. So if you click on that, that will bring you to where we're going to post all committee materials this session. So when we start hearing bills, you'll be able to go by LD to find, products that we produce for work sessions or any other information that you may have requested. Reports that we'll receive will go in that thing. We have some supplemental budget hearings tomorrow. Materials for that's on there. So since we're doing orientation today, that's where I'm going to start and just briefly highlight our overview of our office. And a lot of you I know this already, but we like to just remind folks every couple of years. So as Dan and I said, we work for the Office of Policy and Legal Analysis, which is a nonpartisan staff office of the Maine State Legislature. As staff, we're prohibited from taking or advocating political positions on policy issues or engaging in any activities that might be construed as partisan or political. In addition to providing nonpartisan legislative committee staffing services to all the joint standing committees except for AFA and taxation, we also provide policy and legal research and analysis of bills before the committee or issues before the committee. We draft committee papers that includes amendments or committee bills or reports or other correspondence. We also assist the committees with oversight of state agencies, including reviewing agency budgets and rulemaking conducted. We also do the State Evaluation Act, the State Government Evaluation Act reviews, and then quasi-independent state entity reviews, which I believe EUT does have a few of. And we also help facilitate the committee chairs and facilitating in committee process and organizing committee work. Importantly, especially for those of you who are new, we as analysts are available to assist individual legislators with drafting and information requests. And we also provide staffing for interim legislative studies and commissions. We conduct staff studies during the legislative interim, and we also assist the revisor's office in drafting all new legislative bills. Probably the most important thing that I want to stress about our office and about what we do is that we observe really strict confidentiality policies and guidelines. That means that any communications between legislators and nonpartisan staff are confidential, and nonpartisan staff must protect the confidentiality of requests for assistance, advice, or information and related working papers, including draft bills, resolves, resolutions, orders, or amendments. Of course, if we're given permission by the legislator, we can share that information, but we really like to highlight this so that people know they can come to us, we can help them out, and that information isn't going to be getting out to the public or other legislators unless that person has given us the permission to do so. There are other documents, as you will see, and probably have noticed when I sent the link, about the flow of legislation through committees, Freedom of Access Act, some Zoom guidelines for public hearings and work sessions. I'm not going to go over those each individually. I think a lot of folks probably know most of this, but if you are reviewing any of that and have any questions, feel free to, my screen's jumping a lot, contact me or Dan with those questions. Another thing we are going to do and vote on at a later date is talk about the committee rules. Online there is the model rules. As you'll notice, a lot of that is written with the idea that we are meeting in person, and obviously we're not. However, these rules apply for both the first and the second session. So in the future, if we are able to meet in person, those rules will be applicable. We're not, like I said, not going to vote on those today, but we'll discuss them at some length and vote on them in the next couple weeks. So you may just want to look over those. Included on that page, again, I put the approved committee rules from the last legislature on there just so folks want to see what kind of amendments or changes were made during that time. This year, the committee rules have a COVID addendum. So there are some things that notwithstand the model rules to deal with the idea that we are meeting remotely. I think probably the most important thing to highlight from that addendum is what is considered present. And I think Ben touched on this a little bit earlier as well when he spoke, but a member is considered present at a meeting when in attendance using the Zoom platform and when the member's identity is visually verifiable on the electronic platform. So that means for the purposes of quorum or the purposes of voting, you have to be visually verifiable in order for you to be considered present at the meeting.
Deirdre, can I jump? I was just going to jump in and say that you still do have the 2 business day or 48 hours of 2 business days if you are for some reason joining via phone or unable to make the meeting. And that would be a call to your presiding officer's office and record your vote that way. A clerk cannot take a vote over the phone. Just going to make that very clear so that I can give you the number for your PO's office, whatever you need. I just can't myself take the vote if it was missed during the meeting.
And Ben, just a quick question. Will you be doing follow-up with members to tell them they need to vote within a certain period of time?
Yeah, I will do my best to send out an email, if we end a meeting or end a work session where we took a vote or multiple votes. And, I'll list out the bills that were voted on if the person missed multiple votes. But yes, we will definitely get it so that it's seamless to get the call to the presiding officer to record that vote.
Okay. So I've lost my train of thought. All right, so the COVID addendum, like I said, that's the most important part. Again, we'll go over this a little more thoroughly and discuss it as a committee at a later date. I recommend everybody take a look at this when they have a chance so that when we do meet, you're familiar with some of the changes and some of the exceptions to the model rules and think about if you're wanting to amend anything, what those amendments might be. Then for the session, so those are just the overview. Let me stop sharing the screen now and then go into that. So at this time, There's currently 98 bills indexed to EUT. This number includes 92 legislator filed bills and 6 agency filed bills. For comparison, during the first regular session of the 129th, EUT considered a total of 96 bills that session. So at this point, we are a little bit above what you did last year, and that was kind of a higher number than the prior legislature. It's unclear, though, how many bills will actually get referred to EUT, as there could be bill withdrawals, and then bills are referred to other committees upon printing. And then we can also see the potential for governor filed bills, after deadline bills, or committee bills. So, you know, that number's not exact, but we're probably in the range of high 90s, I would suppose. Another thing that we have before the committee this session will be the review of the governor's proposed budget. As you know, tomorrow there'll be a hearing on the supplemental budget for those subject matters under the jurisdiction of EUT. And then at a later date, we'll probably look at the larger budget. So that's another thing on our agenda this session. Also, the Government Evaluation Act that requires state agencies to undergo periodic review by the legislature. During the 130th legislature, the Public Utilities Commission, including the Emergency Services Communication Bureau, is scheduled for review under the GEA by EUT. So that's something to be thinking about, and that's on the horizon for the committee. Also, each state agency is required to submit a list of rules that the agency expects to propose to the legislature, and the legislative committees are required to review the agendas of the agencies it oversees. So at this point, the regulatory agendas for the Public Utilities Commission and Efficiency Main Trust, that will be distributed at a later meeting to be reviewed by the committee as well. Major substantive rule review. So usually, generally, a resolve is referred to a committee for each major substantive rule that is provisionally adopted by an agency. At this time, we do have at least one major substantive rule to be expecting for review this year, and that's Chapter 895, the Underground Facility Damage Prevention Requirements, and that's a PUC rule. So at some point, we'll be getting a resolve on that for the committee review. And then reports of potential interest for the committee. Various statutes or public laws passed last year require certain reports to be submitted to the committee. A few that were one-time reports that are expected this session was the statewide cable franchise report, which you actually did receive, I think, last week. And that's update on work of the stakeholder group to explore and consider issues related to establishing a single statewide cable franchise. Also to be expected is a renewable energy goals market assessment. And that report is due at the end of this month. And I think it is on the Governor Energy's Office of Policy and Management and the Governor's Office of Policy and Management and the Governor's Energy Office joint market assessment study, including in-depth analysis and review of opportunities, potential, and challenges facing the state in reaching the goals by January 1st, 2030. That 80% of retail electricity sales in the state will come from renewable resources, and along with any recommendations that report would have. And then due at the end of 2021 is a metering and billing systems capabilities bill report. And that gives authority to report out a bill during the second session of the 130th legislature. So that's sort of a very brief and quick overview of sort of the workload expectations for the committee this session. And like I said, I think when I staffed EUT, the bill load was maybe 70 bills. So 98, 100. I think the past couple of sessions is a lot higher than what this committee has usually seen. So looks like Mike Russo has joined us. So I think he'll be up next giving you an overview of OFPR.
Great,
unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Deirdre. And I think what I'll do is, since Mike just joined, we'll go straight on to Mike, and then we'll come back to questions for Ben, Deirdre, Dan, or Mike after Mike is done. But we were also staffed by a member of the Office of Fiscal and Program Review that deals with budgetary issues. We don't have a whole lot of budgetary issues on EUT, but we do occasionally have them. And I'll just turn it over to Mike Russo to fill us in on what he does on behalf of the committee.
Thank you very much, Senator. Apologize, folks. I also staff a variety of committees. Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry was also doing their introduction today, so I was a little bit double booked. probably the only time OFPR will be the popular person in the building. Again, I'm the committee staffer from the Office of Fiscal and Program Review. We are also a nonpartisan office that staffs the Appropriations Financial Affairs Committee and individual policy committees. Our primary role is to do fiscal monitoring, analysis, and reporting for you. We do that through fiscal notes, which is where you've probably heard our name most frequently. Fiscal notes are a brief description of the financial impact of a bill on the finances of the state government. You can identify costs, savings, revenue increases or decreases, and that also will identify a potential state mandate, which is a cost incurred by a local unit of state government. We use fiscal notes to provide independent, unbiased, accurate, and objective opinion to help you, the legislators, understand the financial impact of proposed legislation. It's an important component of the balanced budget process, which is a constitutional requirement. Fiscal notes combined with certain tracking and tabling procedures allow the legislature to coordinate the fiscal impact of individual bills within the larger budgetary process and maintain that balanced budget. The primary tool we use to do that is the special appropriations table. Bills that have a general fund impact are grouped together and held aside so that they can be considered as a unit. Most of the stuff that runs through EUT doesn't have a general fund impact. It usually has another special revenue funds impact. So there are bills that may be affected by it, but there is no special appropriations table for other special revenue funds. Aside from that, when we develop a fiscal note, we use a variety of information. We have department contacts that we can communicate with to coordinate the impact, our analysis. We also have access to all the state financial accounting systems. For units of government like the Efficiency Main Trust, I don't have access to their independent accounts because they're outside of the state government, but we do reference their annual reports and things like that to try and develop a pretty comprehensive picture. Aside from that, there's some recommended reading that's been posted to the committee's webpage. I'd highly recommend you check them out. The budget process is just starting, so the budget process guide that we have is going to be a real page turner in the next couple of days. There's a fiscal note manual that talks about how we develop fiscal notes. If you're looking for a real page turner, there are some excellent information in there. It also talks about comprehensive and incremental fiscal notes, which as we get closer to the end of the session, those will start coming up and will help explain the difference between the two. There's a compendium of state fiscal information. We gather all the revenue information that we can find and put it into a handy report. If you ask me a question about a program, usually I reference that first. There's a revenue forecasting report. With the pandemic going on, you may have heard that there was an off-cycle meeting of the Revenue Forecasting Committee. We'll probably have another one in May, and then there might be another off-cycle one in between, depending on how things progress. The last thing is a municipal funding report. We catalog all the revenues that we disperse to municipalities in the state and put it into a handy report for everyone to read. So aside from that, if there's any questions, I can answer them.
Great, thank you, Michael. So I'm going to open it up to questions at this point for Michael, for Deirdre, for Dan, or for Ben. Does do any of the committee members have a question? Barb, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I just wondered what's the phone number to contact Deirdre, because I have a feeling I'm going to want to talk to her a lot.
I will send you that on the side since we're broadcasting live on Zoom, because I am not working in the office on days I'm not meeting at the committee. I'm working from home. So if you're wanting to reach me on those days, I'll send you my cell number. My office number, though, direct line is 287-1676. So you can always try there first. If you don't reach me, I'll send you my cell.
Thank you.
And Paige, I see, has a question.
I don't know if it's appropriate at this time, but in regards to the AFA tomorrow, do you want those of us to show up at that Zoom meeting?
So from my perspective, and I'll let Representative Berry pitch in as well, I'm very comfortable with members showing up and participating in the AFA process. Seth?
I would echo that. Just a heads up that there are a couple of other committees of jurisdiction that will be before us in the lineup, so it's pretty hard to predict exactly when that will start. So you might want to just plan to, keep it on in the background while you're listening for our committee to come up. just as a reminder and a sort of a heads up to those that are new to this committee, because most of our work is outside of the general fund budget, there will be relatively little overlap with the appropriations process, with OFPR. It's important to know who Michael is and how appropriations works, because we do intersect with them to some extent. For example, the Governor's Energy Office is under our oversight and jurisdiction and funded through the general fund, but most things are not. And that frankly makes it a little easier for us much of the time. So that's the good news.
Great. Any other questions for Michael, for Deirdre, Dan, or Ben? I don't see any other hands raised, so that
I see
sounds.
Deirdre's hand raised.
Deirdre, I wasn't looking at you.
I just wanted to let everyone know I'm going to be listening in tomorrow to appropriations, and when it looks like we're getting to the EUT portion, I can send a message out to committee members. So if you want to check that, so you don't have to watch the whole time, I'll just give you a heads up that you're going to be on soon.
And Deirdre, do you plan to do that by email or by text?
I don't have everyone's number. I was planning on email, but if people want me to just say it's starting via text, that will work. Just send me your number.
Okay, any other questions? Barb?
I just wanted to thank Deirdre for doing that. I actually have a VLA meeting at the same time. And so I was trying to figure out how to juggle. And if I knew exactly when our part was starting, then I could jump over. Because I would like to hear the supplemental budget information.
Great. Well, Seth?
And I want to thank Deirdre and Dan and Ben and Michael and all of the nonpartisan staff that are behind them and supporting them, just for getting us to this point. It's great to finally be together with all of you, and looking forward to having Chad join us as well. But so much has gone into just making this possible. I will say that we expect hiccups. We expect, to learn things along the way through this virtual process, and let us know what we can do to help, and how you think the chairs can make this process go more smoothly. But really, the nonpartisan staff has just been tremendous, and we can't say enough about their work. It's great that we're all able to also be without masks, so we can see each other's faces fully. Ben is in the committee room because the clerks have to be, and he doesn't have to have a mask on because no one is there. So I think we've really made this work well so far. And thanks to everyone, especially the leads, Representative Wadsworth and Senator Stewart, and my co-chair, Senator Lawrence, also for organizing us thus far.
Thank you, Seth. Michael, you had your hand raised?
Yes, just one last thing to add. You're talking about meeting, or the Appropriations Financial Affairs Committee that's meeting later. Anything that's on YouTube is available for viewing at any time once it's been posted. So if you miss a meeting or you'd like to check something out afterwards, there's individual channels for each committee, and everything's posted there. So if you want to catch other portions of the budget or things like that, all of AFA stuff is posted there, and you can go back as far as we have the YouTube channel. So really exciting stuff there.
Good. Any other questions for our staff? I think, Michael, you may want to drop off. Is that correct? So you can go on to other AFA things, but Deirdre, Dan, and Ben are going to stick with us. So thank you all, the four of you, for your presentations. And for the new members of the committee, or new members to the legislature, I should say, Barb and Nathan, you're going to find in the legislative process, there's no shortage of information, and you're going to be overwhelmed with information very shortly. And the key is always trying to figure out what is worthwhile for you to pay attention to. This legislature is a very transparent process, so you're going to get more information than you could ever want. I remember coming first to the legislature years and years ago when everything was done on paper, and there was a rule that if you left it on your desk for more than 3 minutes, it was yours for life. So you had to make a decision in 3 minutes if it was something worthwhile keeping or worthwhile getting rid of. And the rule was if you got rid of it, there was always chances are the legislative and law reference library always had a copy, and you could always find a copy someplace. So you're going to get inundated with information. And the key is going to be to focus on what things are most important to your committee and stuff. And don't hesitate to ask the members who have been on the committee before and in the legislature before in assistance in trying to manage that, all that wealth of information. So now we're going to go on to briefly just talk about the committee process for the next 15 to 30 minutes, kind of get set up. And then we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to hear from the PUC, which is one of the agencies we probably have the most dealings with as a committee, and an important part of our process. Ben, I see your hand raised.
I just want to nip this in the bud. When we do go on break, just mute yourselves and make sure your camera's off. We're not disrupting the Zoom, and also the live stream will continue to go and then get cut down later, I believe. So if we do go on break, hopefully my office is coming up with a sign we'll put up over my screen that says we're on break. But other than that, just make sure you're muted and make sure your video's off, because the meeting will still continue.
And that's a very good point to lead into our process discussion. And some of you sat in on our test run last week, but I just want to go over a couple of things again. First of all, you should always assume a hot mic when we get together. And I'll go over the one exception. What I mean by a hot mic is that it's being broadcast live and that it's being recorded. So just be conscious of your comments, conscious of what you're saying. The one exception to that is when we break into caucus. Likely Representative Berry and I have talked about this. The Democrats will be breaking off in caucus to a private Zoom, and I believe the Republicans will be doing the same in the event that we do have a caucus, and they will organize that private Zoom. And caucuses are essentially for very frank discussions among members about strategy, about where you want to go, what you want to compromise to, where you want to try to seek an agreement. So that's why they're off mic, they're off public recordings, so that we can have a confidential strategic discussion. I think everybody is dressed well today. We said business casual and everybody looks fine. I don't see anybody in Elmo pajamas or anything like that. And this is kind of the format I'd like to keep. One of the roles of the chair is to keep decorum in the process. So it looks like we're doing well with being muted and giving the person floor to speak and using the raise your hand function. Chris, I see you have a question.
Thank you, Senator Lawrence. Not a question, but a comment. I just want to say on the subject of the hot mic, thank you for giving me a reason to tell my children to keep quiet, because I've let them know that whatever they say may be heard by the whole state of Maine.
Yes, and that's a very good point. That's a very good point about you should be in a space that imitates what the committee room would be like. A space where there's not going to be interruptions, where there's not going to be things going on behind you. I ask everybody to get kind of a neutral background, remembering when we do have committee rules, we don't allow political signs in the committee. We don't allow demonstrations. We don't allow certain things in the committee room. So you should treat the room you're in now, as the same thing. You have to take down your Malcolm X sign, or you have to take down whatever, you have in your private space to provide kind of a neutral setting in the background. And I just ask members to be respectful to each other. One of my roles is, I always describe this as a chair of a committee or a presiding officer in the legislature is like a teacher in the classroom. They control the conversation going on so that people don't begin talking back and forth to each other. So all questions, all comments, all discussion is directed through the chair. And when you're recognized, you'll be given the mic, and Ben will turn on your mic. We are going to try to get, and maybe Deirdre can update us on, for public hearings, a clock for the public hearings. So the three types of meetings we're going to have are informational hearings and meetings like this. We're going to have public hearings on particular bills, and then we're going to have work sessions. And we're going to take it very slowly. The leads and Representative Barry and I have discussed this. What we've decided is starting off with a single bill on a public hearing, so we can practice this process, make sure it works well. And then as we figure out how quickly we can do it, to build up the number of bills we can get. And as you know, during a public hearing, the public is allowed to testify. We have to figure out how to do that on a whole speaking order. But when we get to work sessions, it's only the committee members allowed to speak. And unless public members, unless they're invited to speak, are not allowed to speak. And so we're going to need to discuss in our process how we set that up. And if a member wants to have somebody there who they intend to ask a question during the work session, giving Ben a heads up so Ben can put them in a waiting room so they can be easily and readily available during the work session. On these informational sessions like this, it's a little bit more free flow. And it is the committee with the public listening in, but it's not the same formal format as a public hearing or a work session. We are hoping to, last legislature, the EUT committee had a 3-minute clock for public hearings. We're hoping to bring that back. And I'm hoping maybe Deirdre or Ben can update us on whether or not we're going to be able to have an on-screen clock. Do either of you know whether or not that's possible? Deirdre?
As of now, I don't think it's possible. I haven't heard different. The last that we spoke about it, it wasn't available. I believe Senator Brenner from ENR had said they did a hearing or a meeting in HCF. I always mess up the committee, in another committee, and she held up a phone saying that they held the phone up to the screen saying your time is coming out, is coming up. So I don't believe we have that technology capability yet.
My office is looking into it with IT, but yeah, nothing on the horizon.
Chris Kessler?
Yes, just a suggestion. Either Ben or Deirdre, you can screen share a timer on your screen, and that could serve that same purpose.
Interesting. We'll have to look into that, Chris, on how to do it. I mean, after all, this is the EUT committee, and if we can't figure it out, then maybe we shouldn't be on the committee. Maybe we can zoom in a 14th member, the clock, and have the clock up on the screen on a 14th screen. So that's kind of the process. As you know, as Representative Barry referred to, Chris, did you have another question, or did you just leave your hand up? Okay. As Representative Barry referred to, the committee room is accessible by committee members only. We're encouraging committee members not to use it. We're trying to give Ben the space he needs to not be exposed as much as possible. And I think I've talked individually with each member of the committee, and everybody seems comfortable doing it on Zoom. So if we can do that, that's going to be a great advantage to the committee. And as I said, we're starting very slow in our process. We'll probably schedule one bill for a public hearing, and then after we hear that, we'll probably set that one bill for a work session. I expect shortly after that, we're going to build up to possibly 3 to 4 bills each session. And the way we're planning our sessions is to start at 9 in the morning and go till 12:30 in the morning, or in the afternoon, excuse me, with a 15-minute break at 10 or 10:15. And then in the afternoon, we will do similar. We will do 1:30 to 5 o'clock. That'll give people an hour for lunch, and we'll have a break in the middle. Representative Barry, is there anything else you wanted to add on the process?
I don't think so. I see we've been joined by the chair of the Public Utilities Commission. Welcome, Chair Bartlett, and looking forward to our orientation today.
Good. Any other questions about the process before we go on, or thoughts or input? The leads and the chairs are going to get together after each session at the start just to discuss how things went and how people met, how people felt about the process. One of the points that I forget if it was Trey or Nate raised, that if a person had a point of order, we're going to have to figure out how to do that during the process. I think hand raising while another member is speaking is possible. You can also make a little sign and just say point of order if you want me to recognize you. That's the only time that I would interrupt somebody who has the floor. Any other questions about the process? So I'm going to suggest that we go right into the PUC for about 20 minutes and then take a 15-minute break and allow them to complete. So with that, I'll recognize the chair of the PUC, Phil Bartlett. Phil?
Good morning. It's great to be with all of you this morning. We've broken our presentation into two pieces, one being sort of an overview of the PUC and our operations and kind of the lay of the land of what we do. And then we have a second presentation that does a deeper dive into the electrical sector, given that that has been such a huge hotbed of activity in recent years, and we expect it will be in the upcoming session as well. So I'm going to attempt here to share my slideshow. Excellent. Can folks see that now on their screen? Yes, excellent. So the roadmap for the first presentation, just a bit of an overview of our jurisdiction, how we can be of assistance to you, how the PUC is structured, and then we'll walk through each of the divisions, and then pause for some questions, and then we'll, sounds like, take a break before going into the next section. The PUC is a quasi-judicial independent agency that provides policymakers with information on the regulation of the utility industry and also decide cases that come before us. We will be working with you to testify on bills and participate in work sessions, helping you to implement the laws that you enact. We conduct analysis and reports at your request, and we also engage in rulemakings like other executive agencies. And we're also here to assist your constituents, and I'll talk a little bit about at the end about how we can do that. Our core mission, and this is in our governing statute, is to provide safe, adequate, and reliable utility service at rates that are reasonable to customers and utilities. And we take that very seriously, trying to make sure that folks are getting the service they deserve at prices that are reasonable. Our jurisdiction includes a number of different areas. We oversee electric transmission and distribution utilities, natural gas utilities, water utilities. Telephone is limited to the provider of last resort service. We also oversee the emergency 911 system. And we, in fact, regulate Casco Bay ferries and water transportation down in Casco Bay and Portland. The PUC does not regulate cable. We do not regulate wireless phones or broadband, sewer districts, and we do not do drinking water quality, which is done over at the Department of Health and Human Services. So we understand that we get, folks often have inquiries around cable and broadband especially. Unfortunately, that is not under our jurisdiction. So our core operating functions here include adjudicating utility cases. And this is really the quasi-judicial role where we are sitting as fact finders applying the law to the facts before us. We do this in rate cases, enforcement actions, and the like. We also have the authority to open up inquiries and investigations. We conduct rulemakings. And again, we sort of enforce the laws that we are charged with overseeing. We are committed to providing as much transparency as possible and have been working to broaden that as much as we can. We do stream live on our website all of our hearings, including our public hearings. Technical conferences, many of them, though not all, are screened. And these are where staff and the parties to cases are really digging into some of the nuts and bolts of individual cases. Rulemakings, again, rulemaking hearings are streamed live. Our deliberations, the 3 commissioners meet once a week to decide cases. All of our deliberations must be public, and we do live stream those as well. And in non-COVID times, the public may attend in person to any of our proceedings. In the absence, given that the office has been largely closed with COVID, we've done as good a job as we can at trying to get information out about the website so that people can access it there. We've also recently started Facebook and Twitter accounts, really as a means of just getting more information out. We think that transparency involves some effort to make affirmative outreach so that people know that we're here and how they can access us. Our non-adjudicatory proceedings include rulemakings. We can do inquiries. Inquiries are really, they're steps sort of before an investigation or rulemaking. We might open an inquiry if we are considering changing a rule to get feedback from stakeholders. It can also precede a more formal investigation into utility practices. We also issue RFPs to implement state policies, and we conduct a standard offer procurement for electricity, which we'll talk about later. One of the big responsibilities we have is rate setting, establishing rates for our utilities. This is particularly important for a lot of our investor-owned utilities. Rates are broken down into 2 broad categories. The first being operating expenses, which include staffing, vegetation, management, storm response, a lot of the day-to-day work that utilities are doing in order to keep the systems running. There's no built-in profit. Those are passed on a sort of dollar-for-dollar basis to customers in our rate cases. We do an assessment of what it costs the utility to operate, and that is a straight pass-through. There's no built-in return. There is, however, a rate of return that is included for the investments in the hard assets. We call that the rate base. You can think of this as sort of the poles and wires for electric utilities, a lot of the big infrastructure that the utility has to invest in order to provide service. We provide what's called a return on equity, and that is, you can think of that as the profit margin that the utility can earn on those assets, those investments. It's important, though, to understand, and this gets real confusing, while we are establishing a return on equity as part of the rate case, what that does is produce a revenue requirement that is then broken down amongst all ratepayers. What we do not provide or authorize is a guaranteed profit. Whether a utility makes a profit and the magnitude of that profit depends on how well they're running their utility. We think of the return on equity as the amount a well-run utility should be able to earn in normal circumstances. Of course, if expenses are unusually high in a year or if circumstances change, the profits could be higher or lower than that return. The utility's discretion in rate cases is not unlimited. Just as customers are, utilities are entitled to rates that are just and reasonable. And the U.S. Supreme Court has held that a failure to give a utility an adequate return violates the Constitution as a taking without just compensation. So what that means is, when a utility comes in for a rate case, we can't simply say yes or no, right? We are doing a deep dive into every component of rates, all of the operating expenses, any investments that the utility wants to include in rate base to get a return. We do a thorough analysis of that over a 9-month period and to determine what the revenue requirement is. But all of our decisions have to be based on the record before us. They have to provide due process to all the parties, and we have to make sure that both the customers and the utility serving them are treated fairly. The next slide just gives you a quick sense of the cases by industry. These are the sort of the cases that we are handle each year. You can see that electric is by and far the largest workload of the commission. We've also seen increase in recent years of water cases, and the other cases tend to go up and down. We are not funded through the general fund, general tax dollars. Instead, we are funded primarily through assessments on utilities for our regulatory activities, and that is apportioned based on the amount of work we do by each industry. And then our 911 oversight is funded by a surcharge per line on telephones. In terms of organizational structure, there are 3 commissioners. The governor selects 1 to serve as chair. We decide all the contested cases that come before us. We have 6 separate divisions within the PUC. We have, I think, we're now 62 employees that are broken into these 6 divisions, and I'll take a minute to walk through each of them. The first is electric and gas. And again, this is going to be a real quick top-level overview, and we'll do a deeper dive a little bit later. Our electric and gas division conducts financial investigations. They analyze utility operations and financing, do a lot of work with, obviously, our rate cases and looking at the expenses and operations of our utilities. From the electric side, you can see we have 2 investor-owned utilities that they serve about 95% of Maine's load. And those are CMP and Versant. And then we have a handful of consumer-owned utilities in the electric area as well. I've included a map in the next slide that just shows you the territories of each of them. I'm not going to spend time here, but you can take some time to look at that on your own. Electricity rates are broken into 2 components. One is delivery and one is supply. On the delivery portion, this includes the federal transmission line, the interstate transmission lines that run through the New England and form the backbone of the grid. And then the distribution system, which is the poles and wires that come to your house. Those are regulated by the PUC. And on the supply side, there are both wholesale and regional markets, which we'll delve into a little bit later. Other areas on the electric side, as I mentioned, we conduct a standard offer, which we'll talk a little more about later. We oversee long-term contracting. The legislature has given us authority to require our electric utilities to enter into long-term contracts, particularly for renewable resources. We have net energy billing, which we'll get into. And we also oversee the Efficiency Main Trust. On the gas side of the electric and gas division, we have 4 gas utilities in Maine. I've listed them for you. The largest is Northern Utilities, which does business as Unitil. And you see that there's been some modest growth in customers over the last several years. And again, this slide just shows the pipelines as well as the specific gas territories. Our next division is the telephone and water division. And again, our folks conduct financial investigations. They analyze utility operations. We'll say on the water side, we spend a lot of time working with very small utilities, providing them assistance in navigating sort of the regulatory process and to deal with issues that arise. Our telecommunications regulation is limited to what's called provider of last resort service. And this is the landline in your home, making sure that everybody has access to basic service and be able to access emergency operator and so forth. One of the issues we've been dealing with lately is the potential exhaustion of the 207 area code. If nothing is done, the 207 area code is projected to be exhausted by the end of 2024. That means we would need another one. It's important to understand that this does not mean we're actually running out of individual numbers, but the way numbers are assigned are in 1,000 number blocks. And we opened an investigation to see how do we get more of those
lightly used blocks back into the system for recirculation. And we are now requiring each telephone company to provide blocks back to us that have very few numbers used. We won't know the impact to see how much our efforts are extending the area code probably until October of this year. But our hope is to preserve it as long as we can, particularly since I think we're using less than 40% of the actual numbers in the 207 area code. We also review competitive local exchange carriers, or CLEC, applications to operate. And we also oversee certain federal wholesale obligations. And this is really about access of competitors to the incumbent networks. And we administer funding for a handful of programs as well. Just again, listed the telephone service areas for all of our companies. Consolidated is the largest. In terms of water regulation, we oversee water utility rates and service. There are over 150 regulated water utilities in Maine. Many of those are small consumer-owned utilities, either quasi-municipal districts or municipal departments, but there are also some investor-owned utilities throughout the state as well. A serious issue that we've been dealing with Maine in recent years are droughts. 2020 had a particularly severe drought because we did not get much precipitation in the spring months, in sort of May and June, when ordinarily we are accumulating a lot of groundwater before we head into the summer. This is the third significant drought in the last 20 years. And a lot of work has been done to try to get utilities to think through contingency plans, both in terms of water conservation, but also finding redundant sources of water. And so the good news is that while we had a pretty serious drought this year, we did not have utilities running out of water. They were able to put in place their contingency plans to keep providing service. So we will continue to work with utilities to find redundant sources of water, to figure out if there are options to get water from a neighboring utility in certain emergency circumstances. And we're also going to be opening a rulemaking to require utilities to update their terms and conditions to make sure they have a strong conservation plan going forward. The next division is our Emergency Services Communication Bureau, which implements and manages the statewide 911 system. The backbone of the system is provided by Consolidated Communications through a contract. And we provide a lot of training for dispatchers and PSAP call takers in the state. We've also tried to do public service announcements from time to time, most recently around being able to text 911 in certain emergencies. So for example, if you were in a position that you could not place a voice call to 911, perhaps you're being threatened by somebody or a domestic violence situation, you could text 911 instead of making an audio call. All 911 calls are routed to what are called public service answering points, or PSAPs. There are 24 in the state of Maine, and every town has to be associated with one of them. When someone calls into the 911 system, their location is displayed on a map so that dispatch could be assisted. And then just lastly here, just note that we are doing a system refresh on our next generation 911 system that should be completed in February. And so far, it's going very well. Our 911 calls are coming in largely through wireless lines in recent years. There are still some wireline, a significant number of wireline calls, although that number is declining, and some small number of VoIP calls as well. But clearly you can see that it's wireless service is becoming the predominant way that folks are communicating and accessing 911 services. Our administrative division oversees HR, finances, budgets, does the IT, contracting, purchasing. That's also where our press and legislative staff are located. Our legal division Our lawyers act as hearing examiners in all utility cases. They also handle court appeals. If anyone appeals a decision, it goes directly to the law court. And so our legal staff will go and argue before the law court. They also provide advice to the commissioners on a wide range of issues that we're dealing with, provide legislative support, obviously assist in rulemakings, are sort of integrated in just about every aspect of the commission's activities.
Great, Phil, I'm going to ask if you can pause at this time so that
Yeah.
we can take a 15-minute break, and we'll be back at 10:30.
Sounds good. I will just say this is the last division, but I'm happy to take a break.
Okay, why don't we take a break?
Hi, Phil. Could I ask you a question while we wait for the audience? It may be useful.
Sure.
Based on the slide that shows that wireless is really the primary way that people were calling 911, and we look at how the PUC does not regulate wireless carriers, when we return from the break, would you be able to explain why we don't regulate wireless carriers?
I can provide a quick explanation, sure.
Okay, it looks like members are coming back. We are back online with the EUT committee. And we are hearing from Phil Bartlett, the chair of the Public Utilities Commission. And Phil, do you want to bring back up your shared screen presentation and start up again?
Senator Lawrence, while he's doing that, I saw a hand from Representative Ziegler. Do we have time to just...
Paige, did you have a question?
I do. You're using landlines to pay for the 911 calls, and yet they're more involved with cell phones now. Going forward, are you going to have enough financing for the 911 from landlines?
It's financed by both, by what, so it's already, that has been addressed. Just, is that clear? So the funding is based on all lines.
Okay, I'd say you can take it away, Phil.
Excellent, thanks. One of the interesting things about this is with the screen sharing, I can't see all of you. So just jump in with verbal questions or stop me if you need to. One of the questions that I got as we were headed into break was why we don't regulate wireless. And that is simply because the FCC does it. We are preempted by the Federal Communications Commission from regulating wireless service. Our last division to talk about here is the Consumer Assistance and Safety Division. And let me actually go back a slide. We affectionately refer to the Consumer Assistance and Safety Division as CAD. They provide information and assistance to utility customers and handle complaints to help customers to resolve disputes they have with the utilities. This can be related to serving, billing, payment rates, and other utility matters. When the customer files a complaint, which is a voluntary process, but if they file a complaint against the utility, the CAD will investigate that and issue a decision. From that, the decision...
If I could interrupt a second, I'm not seeing the shared screen. I don't know if other members are.
Go back out. That is interesting. Let's see. How about now?
That's wicked good.
That's better?
Yes.
All right. Let me just, there. All right, this is where I started. This was just so the overview I was talking about of the Consumer Assistance and Safety Division. One of the other, so I think as I was saying, when someone files a formal complaint against a utility, the Consumer Assistance and Safety Division, CAD, will do an investigation and issue a decision. If a customer is not happy with that, they can then appeal it to the full commission for a review. We also administer the Low-Income Assistance Program and Arrearage Management Program, and both of these are to help people pay their electricity bills. By the numbers, CAD in 2020 had nearly 5,400 consumer contacts, which was down from nearly 9,000 in 2019. And in terms of actual complaints that were filed, we received 759 in 2020, which was less than half of what we received in 2019. A significant reason for the decrease is with COVID-19 and the moratorium in place and significantly reduced collection activities in 2020, we were not hearing from customers as frequently. Our complaint history over the years, you can see we're typically in the 1,000 complaint range. In 2018 and 19, they were significantly higher, and this is in large part due to the CMP's rollout of smart care and the problems that followed from that. But even then, 759 is unusually low, and we attribute that to COVID. CAT also oversees our natural gas safety program, which is aimed at protecting the public and assuring reliability, making sure that there's safe operation of all natural gas distribution lines, interstate transmission pipelines, and many propane distribution facilities. In terms of enforcement in 2020, we did 281 inspections and compliance audits. We were able to keep going despite the limitations imposed by COVID. Part of that effort is to determine if operators are in compliance with the design, construction, and operation and maintenance requirements of their facilities. In most cases, if a problem is found, it can be corrected informally. If there's something more severe or chronic, we do issue notices of probable violations and assess civil penalties as necessary. We also oversee the Dig Safe program, and this is basically to keep people safe when they're digging. So when someone's going to do any kind of excavation, they have to call Dig Safe, and then the owners of any underground facilities can come and mark them so that they can proceed with a safe excavation and not damage any equipment or cause serious injury as a result, especially if you think of hitting a gas line. We're proud that our gas safety and dig safe programs have received perfect scores in 2020 from the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, we refer to as PHMSA, for 6 years in a row with a perfect score on our gas safety and 2 years for our dig safe programs. So we are constantly working to figure out how to improve them, but are very proud of the safety work that we do here at the Commission. If you hear from customers, hear from constituents who have concerns about their utility, you can direct them directly to CAD, and we've listed here that both the number, sort of the online portal to file a complaint, or they can simply send an email and we will reach out to them. If you want to help a customer, you can also contact us directly, and we're happy to reach out to the individual customers and help them get whatever relief that they need. For just listed here on the last slide, or second to last slide, our Twitter, Facebook, website information. This is all designed to provide information. We are in the process of doing a website overhaul, trying to make it a little more user-friendly and accessible for people. And our legislative liaison, if you haven't met already, you will. He's Garrett Corbin. He'll be our presence in the hearing room, virtual hearing room on a daily basis. You'll also hear from our legal staff, and I will be spending time with you as well when it makes sense to do so. So we look forward to being a resource to you. We are always happy to answer questions that you have. We frequently will be coming before the committee providing information, but we are here to serve, and anything we can do to help as you deliberate this session, we're happy to do. Happy to take some questions now before we dive into the electric division.
Thank you, Phil. Are there any questions now on what Phil has presented? Phil, if you could take down your shared screen so I could see all the participants, that would be great.
Yep.
I see Representative Foster and Wood.
Yep, I've got it. Representative Foster.
Thank you, Senator Lawrence. Good morning, Chair Bartlett. One question. Could you, you talked about the commissioners. Could you tell us where they are in their current terms of service? Thank you.
Yes, we have. I am currently in my second year of a six-year term. Commissioner Williamson's term expires March 31st, and then Commissioner Randy Davis has another 2 years after that.
And Barb, you had a question?
Yes. In a very early slide, it listed on one page what you regulate and then another what you don't regulate. And it said that you regulated natural gas, but it didn't mention propane on either one of those slides. And then at the very, very end, I saw something about propane.
Yep.
I just wondered where that fits in.
Great question. So we regulate the safety of propane. And the earlier slide was referring to sort of our electric and gas division. And so we regulate gas utilities in terms of sort of their rates and service. And then on the propane side, we are simply a safety regulator.
Okay.
Sorry for that confusion.
Other questions for Chairman Bartlett? Great. I don't see any other hands raised. So you still have the floor, Phil. So what's next?
I will attempt another screen sharing.
Okay. I assume those water sounds are just sound effects for the PUC.
The what?
I assume that water sound I heard is just a sound effect.
You know, it's interesting. So I'm in the corner office and the highway goes by outside. So I think it's a combination of wind and traffic outside the PUC.
Great.
Actually, Phil, before you jump in, if you don't mind, I just want to offer for the new members in particular, something that I wish that I had been told when I first started on this committee in 2007. And that is the idea that a utility is a natural monopoly. Really what all of these utilities, whether it's copper, old-fashioned copper telephone service, or electricity, or water or gas utilities, what they all have in common is that there's really only one provider possible in any realistic way. Running two sets of telephone wires in the old days, or two water mains, or two sets of electric wires would be at best inefficient and expensive, and in many cases highly dangerous as well. So these businesses have to be monopolies, and over the course of the decades that electricity and telephone and water service has been possible, we've really evolved two different models: a regulated investor-owned model and a not-for-profit consumer-owned model, and both actually are overseen by our Public Utilities Commission, as Chair Bartlett has mentioned, somewhat differently. But the notion is that if you don't have a free market, if you don't have competition to protect consumers, to keep prices down and service high, you need to have a commission, at minimum, a commission to oversee and to try to provide the discipline that the market would otherwise impose. So I just offer that as a way of thinking about what our committee does. It really is, I think, what ties together most of our work. And the commission obviously is really at the heart of that. So back to you, Chair Bartlett.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a useful framing. There were times when they had wires running all over the place by competing electrical systems. And if you think of something like water or natural gas, where there's a huge infrastructure investment, part of the justification for that is a limited service territory, so that you're not trying to have people compete to lay down, make these expensive investments that can't be fully utilized.
Okay, Phil, why don't you continue with your presentation?
Great. So the next presentation is a deeper dive into the electric industry and sort of the work we do around that, because it's been a huge source of interest and there's been a lot of policy making in this area, and we just have every reason to think that's going to continue. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the basics around distribution, supply, and rates. And then we'll spend a lot more time on the last few bars of that, which are some of the recent and emergent issues facing our utilities and the policies that we are implementing. So when you think of electricity service, we're really looking at two different parts. There is the supply of the energy, and then there's the distribution, the delivery, trying to get that to the people who need it. And in the delivery part of the equation, that's then further broken down into two separate pieces. There's the high voltage interstate transmission system. This again is the backbone of the regional grid that is moving electrons really fast around the region to be utilized where they're needed. And the transmission system is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that is FERC, and we participate in proceedings there. But ultimately, we are not a decision maker when it comes to transmission rates. On the distribution system, these would be the poles and wires and substations and things that are connecting us all together to lower voltage, and it's actually delivering the electricity into your home and business. And that is what we regulate, and that's the centerpiece of our regulatory efforts. And when we talk about rate setting, that's really where the focus is. Those charges include customer-related services like metering and billing, and a few other charges we'll get into in a minute. On the supply side, there is both a wholesale and retail market for electricity. Our wholesale markets are administered by our regional administrator. For most of Maine, that is ISO New England. But for Northern Maine, they have their own separate administrator because they're not connected to the ISO grid directly. Again, FERC has oversight, and we participate in regional forums to try to advance Maine interests. On the retail side, there are competitive electricity providers who can sell directly to individuals and businesses. And the commission also solicits what's called standard offer service, which is a default service that anyone can take. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. We wanted to give you a sense of how the bill is broken down. So we pulled out CMP's residential price by component to give you a sense of what's been happening over time with electricity and distribution rates, and transmission rates. As you can see, the red bar towards the bottom are the distribution rates. And we're proud of the fact that we've kept these pretty stable over the years. At the top in the green are the supply prices, and those are dictated by the market trends. And so there is more volatility there. And then the middle section, the blue, is striking, I think. What you will see is those are the transmission costs that are regulated by FERC. And you will see that transmission costs in the last 10 years have more than doubled. So that is the fastest growing portion of your electric bill. Part of this is because of a lot of reliability upgrades that have been made by ISO New England. And one of the things that we are constantly pushing for is for ISO New England to take into account the costs of their efforts and to be more consumer conscious. Currently, there are, as a process to look at how to reform our wholesale markets and transmission planning that is led by the states to make sure that the states have a greater voice in the work that ISO New England is doing and the decisions that affect us all.
Thanks, Chairman Corlett. Can I just quickly ask, for a couple of those years, the stranded costs were in the negative. Would you be able to explain what exactly that's all about?
Yeah, I'll get to that, and maybe I'll get to that in a slide or two. But yes, I'm happy to. If I don't address it, chime in again, please. So the components of the rates, the transmission rate is again, these are the high voltage interstate transmission system, and there's both sort of the main base transmission system, and then there's the regional network. And for the what we call regional pool transmission facilities, which are the shared facilities in the region, we pay a portion of those. We pay 8% of the cost of the regional transmission projects. And that's based on sort of the amount of load here in Maine compared to the rest of New England. And this again is regulated by FERC. On the distribution side, again, is the cost of constructing and operating our distribution system. Also includes customer related costs, and that is what we regulate when we do a rate case. Stranded costs. The stranded costs are a combination of things. They started out as sort of leftover obligations when Maine restructured, which went from vertical integrated utilities with utility owning generation as well as doing the T&D, and they were forced to sell those off. There were, however, some remaining power purchase contracts, and those were sort of allocated as stranded costs, which for a long time were a pretty significant portion of the bill. It also includes more recent obligations. When the legislature authorizes us to enter into long-term contracts for renewable energy, for example, we buy the energy, but then it is sold back into the market, and that can create a positive or negative. If electricity prices sort of in the time of delivery are less than what we contracted for, then that we essentially lost money. Those are stranded costs. If costs are higher in real time than what we contracted for, then ratepayers are essentially making money. So you can see negative costs when the sort of the assets that make up stranded costs can be sold in real time into the market for more than we paid for them. And also net energy billing, any costs associated with that or other programs would get factored into stranded costs. Other state policies include our oversight of the Efficiency Maine Trust, and we also oversee, as I mentioned before, sort of certain low-income programs, and those are built into the cost of your electric bill as well. And finally, ratepayers pay for the PUC and OPA operations through their bills. On the supply side, it's not quite as simple as simply going and buying a unit of energy. We actually have supply broken into a couple of major components. The first being the energy cost. So this is when electricity is actually delivered in, and it's real time or close to real time clearing prices determine how much you pay in the wholesale market. These are all administered by ISO New England. But then there's also the capacity costs. And this is really about planning, making sure that we have adequate reliability well in advance. So ISO New England has what's called a forward capacity market, which sort of secures capacity 3 years ahead. And a way to think about this is if I'm a generator, I know that I'm going to be selling electricity into the system. I can bid into this forward capacity market, making a firm commitment to provide a certain amount of energy 3 years in advance. This is how ISO can help plan the system and make sure there are going to be enough resources there to meet demand in real time. So it starts with this forward capacity market. It gets very complicated in terms of how ISO determines exactly how much it's going to procure each cycle, and there's a lot of debate that goes into that. And then also who can participate in the forward capacity market becomes a hot button issue when you talk about newer renewable resources, which have a harder time accessing capacity markets. There are some other wholesale market costs like ancillary services. These are things like reserves that ISO New England has to acquire to make sure that the system's running. So a lot of balance of systems needs that get met through ancillary services, which are, again, procured by ISO New England at the wholesale level and get factored into your price. Supply prices also include the cost of complying with things like the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Any line losses and billing charges that occur get passed on. And then, of course, you expect a risk premium and profit by those who are participating in these markets. At the retail level, electricity is supplied by competitive electricity providers. These are suppliers who go ahead and procure a certain amount of energy and then sell it directly to customers. We also have a standard offer supply, which is procured by the PUC. Every single year, we go out and do a solicitation for standard offer. It's competitive. We select the providers, and those prices are offered for those who don't have their own competitive electricity supplier. Good news is, over the last couple of years, the standard offer prices have been coming down. And this just gives you a quick overview of CMP and Versant Power's standard offer prices and the top lines, and then the impact on a typical residential or medium-sized business bill. Part of this decrease has been, quite frankly, because more and more generation has been getting built and capacity prices have been coming down. This is just the same slide as earlier. We have 2 investor-owned utilities serving 95% of the load, and then a handful of smaller COUs. And again, the map from the prior slideshow. This slide is just sort of listing again sort of our broad jurisdiction in the electric sector. We deal with delivery rates with the exception of transmission. We oversee service, availability, quality. We address safety issues. We also issue certificates of public convenience and necessity, or CPCNs, for a transmission line. So even though there may be a big transmission line that gets funded by ratepayers throughout New England, that would still come through the PUC for a thorough review based on standards that you all have articulated in our statutes. We also review mergers and acquisitions and any affiliate transactions, which are transactions between utility and an affiliated company. And we also, as I mentioned before, deal with customer complaints. Our competitive electricity providers are licensed by the PUC. They have to show they have the financial and technical capability to sell electricity to consumers here, and they have to commit to following all laws and rules in Maine. We currently have 260 licensed CEPs. Not all of those are active, and we monitor and enforce consumer protection rules. Often we will get complaints related to activities from CEPs. In most cases, a quick letter or phone call resolves it. We do have a couple of pending proceedings where CEPs have had repeated problems or very serious problems, and we are deal with enforcement actions. And that's where we serve in an adjudicatory capacity. We offer due process to the parties, and ultimately will render a decision whether to revoke their license, whether to impose some other penalty or requirements for them to continue to operate in the state of Maine. There are 3 classes of customers that I just wanted to flag for you. There are the large commercial and industrial customers, or large C&I customers. Most of these procure their electricity through competitive electricity providers. They enter contracts directly with those suppliers. For medium C&I customers, it's a little more mixed, but still 2/3 go and procure in a competitive market. And at the residential level, we're down to about 12% of the load is served through CEPs. Everybody else is taking the standard offer. And a reason for that, and this graph just shows the trend, which is the downward trend for residential customers in the blue. And part of this, quite frankly, is because CEPs have had a hard time beating the standard offer price in recent years. Early on, they were doing better on price, and you can see that there was a much higher uptake at the residential level. It's also very costly at sort of a granular residential level for CEPs to compete, because the marketing is sort of obviously much more intense and expensive than it is for your larger customers, which one single transaction, one single contract can produce significant profits. Again, most of Maine is part of ISO New England. This is our regional grid operator. They were created in 1997 and are an independent organization from the market participants. So they are not directly controlled by any particular market participants. They have an independent board. They're responsible for regional reliability, from the real-time operations to longer-term reliability, and they are regulated by FERC. So again, we will work through ISO New England and with partners to try to influence them, and then we intervene in proceedings at FERC in order to make sure Maine's voice is heard. And again, a lot of work is being done right now to try to give states a greater voice in how to adapt the wholesale markets to better accommodate renewable energy and climate change goals that the states have imposed, and to make sure that customer concerns and affordability are taken into consideration. Northern Maine is not directly connected to ISO New England. They are indirectly connected. They are connected to Canada, and then electrons can move back down, I believe through New York, and get into ISO New England that way. But they are largely isolated from the rest of the state of Maine. Versant's Maine Public District is included, as well as a few smaller COUs. And they have their own system administrator, the Northern Maine Independent System Administrator, which again is responsible for reliability. A lot of challenges result from the fact that the region is small and electrically isolated. There's very limited competition up there. New Brunswick Power has been a good partner and a supplier for the region, but we are, I think, always worried, and there are a lot of concerns about the fact that they are isolated and so dependent on Canada as opposed to being integrated with New England. So next I wanted to walk through some recent cases and some ongoing work that's being done at the Commission, just to make sure that everybody's up to speed and starting from the same place. I realize a lot of folks were not here last year when we dealt with some of these issues. First, I wanted to talk briefly about CMP's metering and billing investigation. This was launched in March of 2018 after our Consumer Assistance Division was getting inundated with calls about bills from CMP and every bit as important, them having difficulty getting through to the customer service line in order to talk to them. CMP had rolled out a new smart care billing system, and it's fair to say it was pretty disastrous. There were a large number of billing errors, and you can see that their call abandonment rate tripled from 11 to 35%. What that means is people were calling in, trying to get somebody on the phone. It was taking 45 minutes, an hour or more, and they gave up. Also, CMP was not meeting its own target of answering 80% of customer calls within 45 seconds, which was an industry standard. And a big part of the problem is that there were a lot of retirements that had happened in the customer service area, and they didn't have either enough or sufficiently trained staff to deal with the onslaught of questions and concerns they were getting from customers. Some key findings from that investigation. We found that CMP's implementation of Smart Care was imprudent. This is a bit of a term of art that we use in the regulatory industry. It means that CMP's decisions were not consistent with a course of conduct that a capably managed utility would have followed. And by making that finding of prudence, it allowed us to take a number of steps and impose a number of requirements on CMP. We required, as part of that investigation, an independent audit of the billing and metering system. They looked at over 4 billion data points and found that the usage that was recorded at the meter was accurate. It was being accurately transmitted to the billing system. And the OPA did an independent audit that reached similar conclusions. There were, however, a lot of Smart Care defects. There were over 70 of them that resulted in errors on monthly bills. Some of them were just presentation errors, which made it look like your usage had changed dramatically when it hadn't, or it had other presentation problems. But a significant number also had bill impact. Some people were overcharged and some were undercharged. All adversely affected customers who had a negative impact as a result of the billing defect have been made whole. They have been reimbursed through bill credits. CMP was required to engage independent consultants to improve their customer service and also to improve and maintain their Smart Care billing system. So we wanted additional testing and independent oversight of that. CMP's management structure is currently being audited, and we're expecting detailed recommendations back in the next few weeks. At the same time we were doing the billing and metering investigation, we had open a rate investigation for CMP. So what we did is we took the customer service problems that sort of related to SmartCare's implementation, and we included those as part of the rate case. And as a result of the imprudence in how they handled the SmartCare rollout and the customer service that followed, we imposed a significant earnings reduction. We required a 100 basis point reduction in their return on equity for at least 18 months. So that means that at a minimum, they'll pay a $10 million penalty based on that imprudence, in addition to all the other costs of compliance with our orders. CMP must meet a set of service quality metrics that were imposed for 18 months before that downward adjustment will be removed. So before they can come to the commission and ask us to lift that earnings reduction, they've got to show that they've actually solved the problems that we identified. The earnings reduction is the largest ever imposed by the commission, and it's a result, we've been told that CMP now has the lowest common equity of any return of any electric utility in the country. So the impact was very real and was noticed around the country. In order, as I mentioned, the service quality metrics had to be met for 18 months before that earnings reduction can be lifted. This just lists the 4 of them. 80% of customer calls must now be answered within 30 seconds. Call abandonment rate cannot exceed 7%. Bill error rate cannot exceed 0.4%, and estimated bills can be no more than 1% annually. So far, CMP, I believe, remains in compliance with these service quality metrics. They do file regular reports with us, and we'll see how it goes in the coming months. I just list on slide 27 some of the key audit areas that are being conducted. 1, obviously looking at the customer service issues. 2, looking at the management structure. One concern we had was whether there was something about the management structure between CMP and its parent company, Avangrid, that may have led to some of the breakdowns in the rollout of SmartCare and the customer service that followed. So we are taking a close look at that. And as part of it, also looking at affiliate services that are being provided as well. Next big case that we completed last year was the acquisition of AmeriMaine by Versant. As part of that merger, we had to apply the net benefit standard to make sure that the transaction would be a net benefit to the customers of AmeriMaine. As part of the stipulation that was approved for that merger, there were $13 million is provided in rate relief, $8 million to all customers, and then an additional $5 million directly targeting low-income customers in the district. Specific service quality metrics were imposed as part of the stipulation, and penalties for not meeting those will be paid by shareholders, not by ratepayers. They also committed to an 18-month stay out before requesting a rate increase. So that means that there'll be no rate increase for Versant customers until October 1st of 2021 at the earliest. I list on slide 29 the service quality metrics. The top 2, Katie and safety, are reliability and deal with the frequency and duration of power outages. And you'll note that there's a benchmark, but also an annual improvement that is required as part of those metrics. And then the others are very similar to what were imposed on CMP. I mentioned that Versant agreed to a stay out until October 1st, 2021, but it takes 9 months to do a rate case. We have up to 9 months to fully review before we make a decision. So they were able to file in January. So they've just filed their rate request for a rate increase that would take effect in October. Their proposal includes a request for a $22 million increase in their revenue requirement, phased in over 2 years. So half of that applied in October 1st, 2021, and the other half a year later. The proposal, as they've laid it out, would increase a typical residential bill by about $4 a month in October 2021, and then add another $4 in October 1st of 2022. It's important to note that this is their opening salvo. We now will go into a series of technical sessions. There'll be a lot of discovery. There will be public hearings. There will be formal hearings in front of the commission before we get to the final result. In recent history, the commission has never granted a T&D utility their full proposed increase. We have a phenomenal staff of utility analysts and lawyers who go through these proposals with a fine-tooth comb. And the public advocate also participates in this proceeding and provides evidence for our consideration. The next item I wanted to discuss was the pandemic response here at the commission. In March, when things got very serious very quickly and we were headed to a shutdown, we managed to move almost all of our operations remotely. We have only a handful of people who regularly are coming into the commission. And we issued an emergency moratorium against any disconnection or collection activity. We were concerned because stay-at-home orders are being issued, businesses were literally being forced to close, and we needed some time to figure out what the impact of the pandemic was going to be on customers and utilities. And we thought it was appropriate to have this step to give everybody time to assess how we should proceed. At the time, we had no idea whether we were looking at a civil emergency lasting a month or two or something much longer. Obviously, it is proven to be a serious long-term impact. At the same time, we also opened an inquiry to assess the impact of the pandemic on utilities and customers. And again, we have all kinds of utilities that we regulate. There are some that are investor-owned that are very large. There are some that are very small and many consumer-owned who really don't have the option of, they don't have a lot of liquidity. They can't go for extended periods of time without revenue. So over the course of the investigation and we took comments, we put out a draft proposal for lifting the moratorium, got some comments, and then finally did lift the moratorium effective November 1st of this year. November 1st was chosen as a date very intentionally because it coincided with the beginning of what's called the winter disconnection period. For our electric and gas utilities, they cannot disconnect customers without commission approval. And there are a number of other added requirements related to disconnection and the notices that must be provided during this winter period. And that is because people use electricity and natural gas to heat their homes. And so this cold period has been a point of emphasis for the commission. The reasons, there were a number of reasons for lifting the moratorium. I just wanted to highlight a couple of the most significant. First, we learned that there were federal CARES Act funding available for a limited window of time. But in order to access that funding, customers had to have a disconnection notice. So the moratorium being in place was having the perverse effect of preventing people to access funds that would actually reduce what they owed. So we were helping them to kick off having to pay it, but they were missing out on an opportunity to get some of that bill paid in the process. Secondly, we were hearing from a lot of our smaller utilities that they were really in a financial crunch. Again, if they're not collecting enough revenue, that can have a serious impact on their operations, their ability to invest in the system, or just to maintain it over time effectively. We also recognize that for a lot of utilities, what we've heard over the years is that it is often the disconnection notice that prompts customers to finally reach out, work with them, or call the commission to figure out what resources might be available so that they can get the help that they need. Our focus always in working with customers who are facing disconnection is to figure out, do they qualify for any of our sort of low-income programs, so LIAP or AMP? Are there other programs that they could be directed to, either from the local, state, or federal resources? And then we work to set them up on an affordable payment arrangement. Ultimately, it is in the long-term interest to figure out how to get into a stable situation than to simply kick the can down the road, which is what our concern with a moratorium lasting a year, year and a half would have serious repercussions for people's ability to ever get out of that hole. We also have a rule that dates back to the 1990s, which sets our late fees. And it's set at the prime rate plus 800 basis points. And every year, it's usually just a routine thing that number gets updated. This year, recognizing the pandemic, we waived the 800 basis point addition to the prime rate. As a result, instead of 11.25% maximum late fee charge, that is at 3.25%. And we'll look at it going forward to figure out if there's a better way than the 800 basis point addition, but that will require a rule change. So the simplest thing to do is just to waive it. I should note that a lot of utilities have voluntarily waived late fees, and for anyone who is eligible for disconnection at November 1st, they are required to waive late fees for anyone who enters into a payment arrangement. The next topic I wanted to discuss is we recently opened a inquiry into T&D service quality and performance. One of the things that I have been particularly interested in is to think more holistically about what we want our utilities to be doing. What level of reliability do we want them to achieve? What are the minimum customer service requirements? What are additional changes that they're going to have to make to their system to accommodate distributed resources and sort of the flexible demand response resources that may be coming online in the future? So we opened this proceeding to begin that discussion and to get some information from folks on what they would like to see. So we identified 7 specific areas to look at, although I expect there may be more that come up in the course of this proceeding. Obviously, looking at service reliability, service quality, storm restoration issues. I think this is really important at this moment in time because we are seeing an increased frequency of severe storms. And by severe, I mean high wind events. So folks are seeing more outages than they may have many years ago, simply because we have much more frequent high wind storms. So we want to figure out what changes need to be made as we're dealing with climate change. We're going to see more severe storms in the future. What should utilities be doing to sort of build in more resiliency and more reliability to the grid? And how do we want to measure that? Do we want to use the traditional metrics, the SAIDI and CAFE, or do we want to start looking at some new metrics that take into account some of these bigger storm events to make sure that there's a real incentive for utilities to improve? Obviously, customer service and field services are important. Affordability and cost control. Are there particular ways that we can measure performance in that area? With recent legislation, we've seen an influx of distributed energy resources, and there are a lot of challenges around interconnection and deployment of these resources. What kind of incentives should we be providing to utilities to make that a priority in their operations?
Chair Bartlett, I just want to jump in here with a question and a little background. Last session, our committee considered and unanimously killed a bill that would have required the PUC to move forward with exactly this kind of process with performance-based rate making. There was considerable discussion at the time. I think part of the committee's concern was that these incentives would be costly, that they would be over and above the required return on equity from capital investment. Can you just elaborate on how we would escape the Hope and Bluefield requirement for return on equity? Because I don't see that.
Yeah, so the intent here is not to be operating outside the system. We currently, our rules currently provide for alternative rate making mechanisms and allow for performance-based rate making. This is not, those decisions ultimately get made in rate cases, how they get factored in. What we want to look at, I think, here is what are the right measures of utility performance. And there are some things that are just baselines that a utility should be doing. And those are the kinds of things you want to put into rules or some basic requirements that all utilities must meet. Then there's a range of things that a good utility is going to be doing well. sort of the range of what should entitle them to a reasonable return. And then there are some additional areas where you may want to push a utility to do more. And that's a place where you might want to use an incentive to make sure that it's prioritized. Ultimately, whether we're using carrots or sticks, or how this would dovetail with rates, would be addressed in individual rate cases. We are not simply imposing something wholly new here. But I think one of the challenges that I often have, and when I'm reviewing when I'm talking with customers, when we are in a proceeding like a rate case, trying to figure out how much should be spent on X, Y, or Z, part of that is getting a better and clearer idea of what the goals are. What is it that we should be expecting from the utilities? What is the appropriate measure of reliability that they should be building their system to? Once you have that, then you can evaluate, are they doing that in the most cost-effective way possible? So I think those are the kinds of considerations that I think are important. Reliability, how important is that? How important is bringing on these distributed resources, and how do we make sure that is a consideration in their operations? So again, how they exactly get factored into rates, that will they'll be part of the discussion here, but ultimately is determined in rate cases.
Let me just make my question a little clearer, put a finer point on it, if I may.
Okay. Seth, at this point, I don't want to get into a big debate about PUC policy.
Yeah, it's just a question.
I'd like to let the PUC do its presentation. We can have questions at the end, but we shouldn't, if they're going to get through what they need to get through, we can't get down into the weeds of debating PUC policy.
I will reserve my question for the end, Senator. Thank you.
And so that's sort of the nuts and bolts. We have an initial deadline for comments, and then we'll determine process after that to further explore these areas. And we're certainly happy to come back to the committee as we work our way through this. There are a number of other programs and policies that we'll start to dig in. One of those is net energy billing. We recently, back November 10th, provided a report to the committee based on net energy billings are reaching a threshold of 10%. And that is designed to we're directed to review the effectiveness of net energy billing in achieving state policy goals and providing benefits to main ratepayers. That report is available on our website. We can also email that directly to you for those who don't have it. Major conclusions were that net metering is very effective at increasing resource diversity through renewable resource generation, promoting solar, especially, addressing climate change, reducing emissions, and sort of building more distributed resources across the grid, which we understand was a goal. At the same time, net energy billing will increase distribution rates, at least in the short term, which could have a negative impact on beneficial electrification. And the reason there would simply be if your electricity rates are getting higher, the trade-off between a gas-fired vehicle versus an EV, for example, could be shifted. The alternatives and recommendations section of the report really is designed to encourage the committee to think about what specifically are you trying to achieve with net energy billing, and can any of those goals be achieved less expensively? If you're concerned about rate impacts as the primary concern, a simple cap on the program obviously would rein that in. You can also provide locational incentives to make sure you're getting the absolute maximum value out of DERs. Not all locations are equal. So some states are moving to a model of more locational incentives so that those that are put in the best places are getting the most money in terms of ratepayer dollars. And then obviously consider whether some of the policy goals can be achieved more cost effectively through alternatives or adjustments in the program. We also were directed to do a distributed generation procurement as part of the net energy billing legislation. And we were supposed to do an initial auction and then make awards in 5 separate rounds. We ultimately concluded that the the distributed generation auction that we held was not competitive. And this was based on a number of factors, including the fact that we saw a huge attrition rate between the initial process with folks who were indicating that they were planning to bid and the number of bidders who actually made it through the process. And the observed bid prices really raised some serious questions about whether we were seeing really competitive bids that were based on competitive powers as opposed to there just being not many in the pool. We submitted our report to the legislature, and again, that can be found on our website. And we made a number of recommendations based on that. I think one of the special challenges with this procurement was the timing of it. We were literally just started this procurement process and we got hit with COVID-19. Part of the statutory requirements were that all bidders have all of their permitting and interconnection agreements, all those things lined up. They had to be through that process. Once COVID hit, it became pretty difficult for a lot of facilities, a lot of bidders to get the permits they needed because everybody was transitioning to the virtual world. So it's no longer just walking into your town office and submitting plans. Everything got harder and everything started taking longer. We also had no flexibility to waive any of those requirements, and we had no flexibility to waive the dates when the procurements had to be finalized. So there was this very compressed time period where a lot had to be done, and folks just weren't making it through that process. So if you're thinking about potential modifications before we go into the trying this again, one is to take a look at the auction structure to see if there are alternatives that could better promote bids that reflect actual project costs as opposed to just adding in a ton of profit on top. You could replace the requirement that the projects have all of their permits completed because that serves as a winnowing effect of those who actually can get into the queue to make the bid. And then for those who need ISO New England approval, we would suggest allowing them to submit a bid even if that's not finalized, just because of the time it takes. We had a much more successful procurement based on the RPS legislation that the legislature passed. We were authorized to go out and procure between 7 and 14% of the amount of energy use in 2018. We were to do that through 2 separate procurement rounds. And in the first one, procure between 7 and 10% of the total. So this was a highly competitive process. We received a lot of interesting bids. We were required to take economic development impacts into account. And so there was 30% weight given to the economic factors. But many of the projects would have passed a straight ratepayer benefit test anyway, based on the low prices that came in. We awarded 17 term sheets. Most of those were to solar, but there were biomass, hydro, and wind in the mix as well. Energy prices range from low of 2.9 up to around 4 cents a kilowatt hours, which is very competitive pricing. Projects are expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 500,000 tons per year and provide an estimated 450 full-time equivalent jobs across all projects. We do have a provision in our contracts for these 17 projects that if they do not meet the economic metrics that they have said they would, that there would be a reduction in price. So we are making sure that if, to the extent that their bid was based on economic benefits, we're going to hold them to it. The second procurement has just launched. We've issued the procurement announcement, and we're having a bidders conference on February 3rd, which is an opportunity to answer questions for those who would like to bid in the procurement. There are a number of other programs I'm going to try to tick through fairly quickly here for you. I've mentioned the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, a couple of times. This is a pretty common market mechanism that's used by Maine and many other states to support the development and operation of renewable resources. Maine is one of many states in the region with an RPS, although every state has a slightly different take on exactly what resources qualify. The general structure is to require that every supplier of electricity procure a certain percentage from eligible renewable resources. And they get paid the generators essentially get paid a premium over the wholesale electricity price, because in order to meet this obligation, suppliers have to buy what are called renewable energy credits. So if you are, for example, a wind farm producing energy, you're going to sell the energy into the wholesale market, and then you're going to sell the renewable energy credit into a separate REC market that the suppliers will then take that renewable attribute so that they can meet their obligation. Prices for these RECs are set by the market and then are ultimately passed on to consumers through the supply prices. Maine has 3 categories of resources. Class 2 resources, this really arose out of restructuring. It was designed to protect existing assets. So that 30%, I think, was met the moment it was imposed. Then in 2007, the legislature passed Class 1 resources, which ramped up the RPS requirement from the 30% to 40%, and they had to be newer renewable resources. And then Class 1A was enacted in 2019, and that's going to take us from 40% to 80% by 2030. This slide just shows you how the RPS is currently being satisfied. It's largely in Maine being satisfied with biomass and then with some hydro and wind. You might ask about all the wind farms and new solar projects going up. Where do they sell their RECs? Well, they can sell them, they can use them here in Maine, but they can also sell them in other parts of New England. And the RECs in southern New England tend to go at a much higher price. So they can get the benefit of selling them into the Massachusetts or Connecticut system. Generation by fuel type in Maine. You can see we have a very clean electricity generation mix in Maine. Now, this is not region-wide, this is just the Maine-based generation. And as you can see, over 80% of that comes from renewable resources. You've seen over the last decade a decline in the natural gas and a significant increase in wind, which is that purple band. We also have long-term contracting authority, what we call 3210C procurements. Every 3 years, we're required to do a solicitation under 3210C. These are based purely on ratepayer benefit. So we take the bids that come in and we compare that against projections of energy prices over the term of the contract. The 3210C has a preference for 10-year contracts, although we can go longer if we determine that that's in the best interest of ratepayers. So far, it's important to understand that we make these decisions. They're made based on the best information at the time. So you're looking at the price based on where you think the market's going to go for energy going forward. So far, the contracts have not resulted in net payer benefits, despite the fact that they were projected to do so, in part because we've seen a significant reduction in supply prices in recent years. The purpose of these contracts, both under the RPS procurement that I just talked about and here, is that these long-term project contracts provide financing for projects. One of the biggest concerns you hear from renewable generators is in order to get these projects built, they have to have a long-term contract in order to line up their financing. We have done 6 solicitations, and I've listed on slide 49 the various projects. They range in size. Some of them are for energy, some of them are for RECs. And you can see, the prices are, some of the prices are quite good, but we're also dealing with a decline in prices in recent years. If prices start to go back up again in the future, we will see these contracts saving ratepayers money. There's also the Community-Based Renewable Energy Act, which was in place for a while, which allowed for locally owned community-based renewable generation up to 10 megawatts. And I just threw this slide in here so you can see that we still do have a handful of operating plants that were constructed using the Community-Based Renewable Energy Act. We also have entered into contracts under the Ocean Energy Act. This was passed in 2010 and allowed long-term contracts for a deep water offshore wind energy pilot project, as well as for a tidal energy demonstration project. The tidal project is currently out of service after brief operations. And then Maine Aquaventus, which you probably are familiar with, we have a contract for 23 cents per kilowatt hour. And again, these prices are high, but the point is to support this fledgling industry and to prove that it's achievable and can be scaled up to be made affordable. Commercial operation is expected in 2023, and we're interested to see how that develops. Maine is also a participant in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap and trade program for CO2 emissions from power plants. This is not just New England, but it's kind of the whole Northeast, spreading down into the Mid-Atlantic states who participate in the program. Every state has an allocation of permits that are auctioned off, and then the revenue comes back to each state. So far, Maine has received over $116 million from the sale of carbon allowances, including $5 million in 2020 alone. This money goes to Efficiency Maine to support efficiency. So I think one of the great successes of RGGI is the direct investment in efficiency that has helped consumers and helped reduce the growth in electricity usage in Maine. So that sort of concludes the report. One thing I should note is that we sent along with our slide presentations a copy of our annual report. All three will be reposted on our website. The annual report is really a thorough look at our operations. It goes through all of the major cases in every major division, provides a little more detail on the work that each of our divisions is doing, and has some budget information and so forth. So I encourage you to take a look at that as a really, I found it to be a very helpful resource as you're thinking about the work and the structure of the PUC. With that, I'm certainly happy to take any questions.
Senator Lawrence, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Apparently I hadn't recognized myself yet. So we're going to have a period of time for questions for Chairman Bartlett. A reminder, the committee, we're finishing up at 12:30, and we want to give everyone a chance to ask their questions. So I'll recognize first Representative Wood.
Hi, I'm going to go way back to close to the beginning of your presentation. You were talking about the complaints that CMP had, and you talked about the smart care implementation, and I'm not familiar with what smart care was, and is that what caused the jump in complaints in 2018?
Yeah, so Smart Care was the ill-fated name for their new billing system. They had a pretty old, antiquated billing system, needed to be upgraded, so they went with they built this Smart Care. And this is, utilities have to do this every 20, 30 years, to upgrade their billing systems. So they, when they rolled it out, it still had a lot of bugs. I mean, we believed and we found they didn't do adequate testing before they rolled it out. So it still had a lot of defects in it. And that was causing all kinds of weird things to happen on bills. Some people, it made it look like they had really high usage. Some people were underbilled. There were all kinds of presentation errors where you may have a chart that looks like you doubled your usage even though you hadn't. So there are all kinds of sort of errors that were taking place on the bills. And if that wasn't bad enough, it was compounded by inadequate customer service. They were not equipped to respond. So, if you're a customer, you see something funky on your bill, you call, you get somebody, you quickly get it addressed, it probably doesn't become a huge issue or a huge story. But their customer service staff wasn't well trained in being able to deal with or figure out what some of these defects were, and customers couldn't get through for an extended period of time. So all of that just led to a total, what I consider a total debacle, and really extraordinarily poor performance during that period. The worst part about this rollout, perhaps, or not the worst part, one of the bad luck portions of this rollout is that it occurred as we were heading into a very severe cold snap. Now, you see electricity usage jump when weather gets very cold. This happened for Versant just as well as CMP during that same period. So people were also experiencing higher than normal usage because, a significant part because of that cold weather. So you had a lot of different things going on. CMP not able to adequately to explain or quickly respond to the problems that were showing up. And that led to a really bad outcome for customers.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
Senator Vitelli.
There we go. Thank you, Senator Lawrence, and nice to see you, Chair Bartlett. I have a simple question. I'm wondering what or who counts as low income? You made reference to that in some of your explanations of your programs. And how does that get identified? How do they get identified? What's the standard for low income?
So most of our programs, they have to be means tested. So ours usually are contingent on eligibility for something like LIHEAP, I think is the most common. So I think like the LIHEAP program, if you're eligible for LIHEAP, you're eligible for LIHEAP. And I think the question going forward is, are there other means tested programs that could be included?
Thank you. Representative Grochowski.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have two questions, if I may. The first is related to your response to Rep. Wood's question. So I see that Versant is looking to enhance its metering system to something maybe similar to what CMP has done. And given what we've seen with their rollout, is the PUC going to apply any oversight to their this whole process? And I just really don't want to see the Versant territory suffer in a similar way when we should know better at this point. That's my first question.
So I would say that every sort of IT project is its own project. These systems are designed specifically for the utility and their needs. At this point, Versant has not come in seeking approval of anything related to that. I'm not, as far as I know, they've not included any cost recovery in the rate case. But traditionally, we review utility decisions for prudency based on the reasonableness of the steps they took. We do not regularly pre-approve individual decisions. They can seek pre-approval, and I think CMP did when they were doing theirs, but they don't. There's no requirement that they come to seek pre-approval. I will say that just in some informal conversations with Versant, they're very mindful of the problems that CMP had, and I think I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, to bring them forward to talk about their plans. And yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that for right now.
Representative, did you have a second question you wanted to pose?
Thank you. Yes, I did, Senator Lawrence. My second question is related to public input in different cases, different dockets at the PUC. I think it's partly just to make this committee aware, but there is an opportunity for the public to make comments. However, it's sort of unclear to the public how those are integrated into the decisions of the PUC, because if they don't go in person or file an affidavit, then it doesn't really count as part of the administrative record, might be the way to describe that. So I wonder if you could tell us and the viewing public what happens when they create a public comment. How does the PUC weigh that?
Yeah, so we do have through our website an opportunity for folks to provide public comments. We also get a fair number of comments by mail that come in. I can say that we review those every single week. So every week I get a report that includes the public comments that have been received, and I and the other commissioners do look at them. So it's important, I think, for the public to understand that if you are commenting, we are taking the time to review them and consider them. When we get into an adjudicatory proceeding, like a rate case or like a merger or acquisition of a company, we have to build a record just like a court of law would. So that means we have to take sworn testimony in order for it to be included. We do public hearings both at the commission and on major cases, we will travel around the state. So, for example, we did public hearings around the Versant, the NMAX acquisition of Emera, Maine. We did a series of public hearings around the billing and metering and rate cases for CMP. So we try to go out and meet people where they're at. I think in the COVID era, in the cases coming up, we will be looking at new ways for folks to participate remotely. And if we have success, I would like to make that a permanent part of our process so that folks don't have to travel extensive distances if they want to participate. But because of the adjudicatory nature of those cases, if they come to a public hearing, they can be sworn in and anything they say does become a formal part of the record, or they can submit a sworn affidavit. They'll be considered as part of the record as well. So we will try to communicate that going forward as cases pop up to make sure people have to know how to participate. If you have additional suggestions or input for us on how to communicate that, we're very happy to receive those and do what we can.
Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Senator Lawrence. Chair Bartlett, I have two questions. One was related to Senator Vitelli's question around determining what that level is for low income. What is the exact statutory procedure that you would undertake to determine that?
Yes, I believe it's contained in our rules, like for the LIAP program. I believe that's contained in our rules. And that's, I think it was based at the time on the understanding that folks were applying for LIHEAP. The CAPs were very good at identifying those folks and could easily communicate that with the utilities. So I'm pretty sure that's in rulemaking.
So a routine technical rulemaking?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And the second question is around the disconnect notices. I was wondering if you could tell us what the frequency of occurrence is right now where you actually are granting disconnect of a residential customer in these current COVID times.
Sure. So we have received 0 requests for disconnect from the investor-owned utilities. So the CMP and Versant have not requested any disconnections, nor have any of the 4 natural gas companies. So they haven't brought anything to us. We have received requests from at least one consumer-owned, and all of those were based on non-contact with the consumer, so they couldn't reach them. And part of the requirement is that they actually go out to the house. So they will mail notices. They have to go and post something at the place to give every folks an opportunity to speak up. If at that point they still are not reaching them, then that's a situation where our Consumer Assistance Division may well permit a disconnection. But then if the customer were to call in, they immediately have to get turned on so that a payment arrangement can be set up. I will say that the Consumer Assistance Division bends over backwards to find ways to help customers avoid disconnection. And the biggest challenge usually comes down to having a conversation with them. Usually, if they are responsive to the utility or they're responsive when we try to reach them, if a disconnect is requested, we can help solve the problem and keep them connected. So if to the extent constituents are concerned about it, they should contact their utility. And if they're not getting any relief there, they should call us, because our Consumer Assistance Division has the authority to determine what that payment arrangement is. So they don't have to rely on the utility. If they feel like they're not getting help or they're not getting the service they need, they can then turn to us and we'll do everything we can to help them.
Representative Foster.
Thank you, Senator. Chair Bartlett, in regards to distributed energy resources, when the PUC considers approving a project, do you or how do you take into consideration the cost of interconnection? You mentioned that earlier. How is that factored in during that process? Not only the interconnection costs that the project will require, but also maintenance of interconnection facilities after the project is up and running. Thank you.
So in terms of the way the net billing has been set up, for most of those, any resources that are coming on through that program don't come to us for approval. So the visibility we have is really just looking at the queue that both CMP and Versant have to see what is being in line for interconnection. They then have to go through a process and enter into an interconnection agreement based on the costs that are identified. So that's the level of review. We are not doing a case-by-case review of each project, and that's a bit of the challenge. I think it is very difficult to know exactly how much is going to get built, where, and what the cost is going to be, because we are really just seeing the interconnection queues. We're seeing what's being filed. For the distributed procurement, then any cost would be factored into the price that they would bid into the procurement process.
Representative Foster,
So
do you have a
let's
follow-up?
Yes, thank you. We'll try this out, follow-up if I could. So I would guess from what your answer is that the only time that actually comes into play is when someone like Versant comes to you for a rate increase. That would be part of their justification for that. That's when the PUC actually gets a look at what those interconnection costs and for that particular project, how they come into play for the rates that are requested.
Well, they are entering when the new resource is coming on, they're entering into an interconnection agreement with the utility. The utility has to do an assessment of what the costs are going to be, and then those costs are imposed either on a single entity, or in some cases that can be shared across multiple facilities who are interconnecting in to the same substation if an upgrade was needed. So those costs should not be being passed on to consumers under the current model.
Are you all set, Representative Foster?
And I should just note that I was handed a note that the LIAP is typically about 150% of the federal poverty level. So that's what it is determined through LIAP eligibility, but it's 150% of the federal poverty level if you wanted that additional detail.
Okay, Representative Wood?
I have some background noise. I hope you can hear me. And I apologize. I should have said I had two questions. I'm just trying to understand some things that you had said about power outages. I thought earlier on, I'm not sure exactly what you were talking about, but I thought you were saying that power outages were sort of on par. They weren't higher than they'd been in the past, but then later I thought you said they were. So I just misheard something.
I think it very much depends on where you're located. But I think I don't have the trend information. I haven't looked at that recently, but I would just note that one of the in conversations I've had sort of with our team and with the utilities is we are seeing an increasing frequency of high wind events. And it's not so much that just a storm coming through that's a problem. It's when you have high winds and very high wind gusts. The other interesting thing is that we're seeing a lot more storms earlier in the season when leaves are still on the trees, and that can cause additional outages and damage because the trees can.
So we're not saying that it's a factor of the utility service. It's a factor of our weather pattern.
I'm not making a finding one way or another. I mean, I think it can be a combination of things. I will say that in recent years, our utilities are doing more frequent cycle trimming, going through and actually trimming each circuit more frequently than in the past, but we also are seeing more storms. You also have to look at the age of the infrastructure. So if you're in an area where the poles are very old, then it's not going to take a severe storm to bring them down. I also think that when you're dealing with severe storms, you're dealing with more hazard trees. We call them hazard, which are trees outside the right-of-way. So no matter how much you go and trim the right-of-way of the utility, if you have a lot of trees nearby and you have serious storms, those trees and limbs from those trees can come and impact the system. And utilities do work to try to reduce hazard trees, but that's entirely dependent on homeowners or property owners granting permission for them to do that. So I would just note that it's complicated. It's a complicated problem. And part of rate cases, we look at what are things like what is their vegetation management plan? What are they doing around hazard trees? There was CMP's last rate case, they had a proposal for some pretty aggressive steps. And we did not include all of them because we didn't think there was evidence to support that they would actually increase reliability significantly. But we did, as part of a 10% complaint, approve a lot of the things that they wanted to do so that there'd be sort of a pilot program and we can assess, is spending this money to do sort of ground to sky clearing and investing more in hazard tree removal, is that going to make a difference? And other changes that can make a difference. So we do expect when a utility comes into a rate case and says, we have this great plan to improve reliability, we want some evidence to support that those additional dollars are actually going to achieve the desired outcome. Because the last thing we want is to see a huge increase in spending on reliability and no improvement in actual results.
Are you all set, Representative Wood?
But I would say on a large rate that probably, both our major utilities, investor utilities in Maine, could do better, and I think are working to do better. And I think we need to make clear what the standard needs to be that they have to meet.
Representative Cuddy.
Thank you, Senator Lawrence, and thank you for being here, Chairman Bartlett. Looking at slide 46, I noticed where it's talking about generation from main facilities by fuel type. The thing that immediately struck me is that looking at the 2008, 9, and 10 numbers, we're close to 12 million megawatt hours generated. And then looking at the 2019 number, we're looking at just over 8 million megawatts generated. And obviously there's a huge contraction in natural gas. But I'm new to the committee. I'm new to some of these issues. And when I look at a loss of 3 million megawatt hours of generation, how does that happen without brownouts occurring? And what is going on? And I understand this is a huge question because we're talking about the whole ISO New England grid, but how has this occurred? Sort of where has this loss occurred? And then B, how are we still effectively keeping lights on without brownouts?
So that snapshot was looking at sort of generation in Maine. Maine is part of a regional system. So electricity comes in and out of the state. There are many times when we are net exporters of electricity, but if we need additional electricity, we get it from the south coming in. So the actual generation is not always reflective of the amount that we're using. They're sort of separate things. I'd also note that when you're looking at sort of gas or oil generation, there are two things. So one is plants that are in operation, and then two, how often they're running. And I think one thing we have seen with more renewables coming into the system, that reduces the amount of gas that needs to be produced. So we are seeing for example, with a lot of solar on a summer sunny afternoon, instead of firing up natural gas or in worst case scenarios, oil to meet a summer peak in air conditioning costs, you are displacing some of that more expensive fuel. So I don't know if that helps, but what I was providing there is really just a snapshot of what's on the ground in Maine, but doesn't really integrate it, provide the complete window into the system that we're part of.
Thank you, it does.
Thank you, Representative Cuddy. Representative Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett, for your presentation. The PUC, how is that dealing with the utility scale facilities versus the smaller distributed generation facilities especially on the cost differences?
Yeah, utility scale, those are either going to be handled through like the contracts through these larger procurements. So the RPS procurement with 17 projects, those were all larger sort of grid scale projects that we've put under contract. They also can get contracts in other states. So that just because the generation is built here, they can get a contract for their output in another state that's connected to the region. So that's sort of how it's done. I mean, it's the older days. It used to be the utilities were making decisions about what generation assets to buy. Now, all supply is procured through the market, with the exception of the state contracting that Maine and a lot of other states are doing. So those larger scale projects, we are procuring directly through contracts. The price difference, I think, really has to do with scale. I mean, we've seen, especially solar prices come down dramatically. And that's in Maine and across the region, across the country, are seeing much more competitive prices for the grid scale solar and also for onshore wind.
Could I just follow up?
Yes,
So
Representative Ziegler, go ahead.
The smaller scale projects, they have to have the subscribers before they start, and that makes it more expensive, correct? And also, they're not allowed to, they don't have the RECs at the end. Is that correct?
Right. So that depends. So yeah, they're smaller projects. There's currently the FERC has required consideration of how distributed resources can be aggregated and bid into the wholesale markets. So that the world's changing a little bit in terms of how that aggregation will happen. In terms of the renewable energy credits, whoever owns that facility owns the credits. So if you're if you have solar on your roof, you are generating renewable energy credits. But in most cases, you're just going to retire those, sit on them because you want your power to be renewable. As you have more facilities, smaller facilities, 2, 3, 4, 5 megawatt facilities, those can sell their RECs into the market. And I think there was another question early on that there's part of that I might have missed.
Thank you.
Representative Ziegler, are you all set?
Well, I think there's a question about the subscriptions, and there are pretty strict subscription requirements that have to be met, absolutely, and that does impact the overall cost of operating these facilities.
Well, then the last thing, do you think we could reduce the cost? I mean, what are we looking at? 14 to 19 cents per kilowatt versus 3 to 5, something like that. Is there a way to reduce it on the small under 5 megawatt producers?
No, I think that's a question. I think one of the questions is, what extent does size matter? Does a 3, 4, 5 megawatt facility need the same kind of financial support as a 1 megawatt facility, for example? Those are questions to be asked. Ultimately, I'm not intimately familiar with the cost structure. I don't put these, obviously I'm not on the developer side of putting those together. But I do think that it's worth hearing from them about what are some of the drivers of costs to see if there's a way to get these resources built in a more cost-effective way for ratepayers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ziegler. Representative Cuddy, did you have an additional question?
I did. Thank you, Senator Lawrence. Chair Bartlett, you spoke about CMP having to meet certain service quality metrics for 18 months, and that they're reporting to you, and that currently their reporting looks good on that. What's the mechanism for auditing and enforcing those reports?
So once they've reached 18 months of compliance, they can come to the commission to seek the restoration of the earnings reduction. So they could do that through filing a rate case. They could petition the commission separately to look at it. We've made clear that we're going to do a thorough analysis. So that would be a proceeding where we would look at their data. We would ask a lot of questions. The public advocate's office would participate, and we would do a deep dive to see not only are those metrics being met, but are the range of problems that were identified in the billing and metering investigation and the rate case, have those been sufficiently addressed? And so we're going to take a very hard look when CMP comes in to make whatever filing they choose to make.
Just a clarifying follow-up, Senator Lawrence.
Go ahead, Representative Cuddy.
So the audit is only going to take place at the end. For 18 months, they're going to report to you, and those numbers get sort of taken at face value until the end. Is that right?
Yes and no. I mean, so I would say, yes, we are not going to go and do independent audits of each of their quarterly reports on their performance metrics. With that said, if there are problems, if we are identifying significant problems, we always have the opportunity to open an inquiry or an investigation. So at any time, if we are concerned that there are significant problems, we will address them. That's probably the best way to answer that question.
Thank you.
And Chairman Bartlett, my understanding is you've been doing all your hearings by Zoom. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're using Microsoft Teams. So everything is being done, and we are, in most cases, are streaming those live. In cases where we can't, we've had a couple of cases where we couldn't, we post the video as soon as we can afterwards.
Can I get just your perspective on how you think due process rights are protected under that format, particularly with respect to the public testifying?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for due process, I think most importantly, you want to make sure there's access. You want to make sure that whatever format you're using, people can reasonably use. So we have not had, we've had hearings, but we haven't had sort of public hearings where we're taking public testimony yet. We will be in this coming year. So we will look at how best to do it. We will not require, I imagine, it is unlikely we would require them to have access to the internet. Absolutely. We'll have that option, hopefully. But if folks don't have internet access, we would want them to be able to participate by phone, and we'll figure out how to do that. And we'll also have probably an extended process for people to submit affidavits so that they can get their viewpoints in. So when we get a little closer to having a public hearing, we'll figure out where we are in terms of COVID and take appropriate steps to protect everybody. But I am 100% committed to making sure that the public has an meaningful opportunity to participate. And that means it's got to be meaningful. It's got to be something that anyone can take advantage of.
And how are you finding the ability of people to cross-examine witnesses, to see witnesses face to face, to guarantee that the place where the witness is testifying from is secure?
Yeah, so far it's been okay. And I would say historically we at times have allowed folks to participate in our proceedings by telephone when necessary. So we have some experience doing it. We will see. I mean, at this point, we haven't had some of the bigger cases with lots and lots of parties. As we head into this year, I think we're cognizant of the fact that we're going to have some big cases, and there's going to be a lot of interest in that. I do think that it is better to have in-person hearings when you can, at least from my personal perspective. Being able to sit across the room and cross-examine them is, for me, more meaningful. With that said, the hearings we've had on our Teams sessions have been very good. Folks have been very cooperative, and I've not felt like I can't get my questions answered. So I think we'll be continuing to feel it out as we go. I don't think we'll ever move to remote hearings as a regular thing, but I do think they can be useful, and particularly when you have a witness far away, if you can reduce the costs of them participating, that can that can have real value for ratepayers.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions before we let Chair Bartlett go? Seeing none,
Yes,
thank you very much.
I do have one.
Representative Barry.
Sorry, just want to make sure everyone else had a chance. Going back to that earlier discussion, Chair Bartlett, and I apologize. I don't think my question was quite clear enough. You described in your presentation a decision to penalize one of our utilities by going down to an 8%, or maybe it was 8.25. I always forget which it is, return on equity, and that being the lowest in the country. If we're going to incentivize something other than capital expenditures, if we're going to compensate utilities for something, investor-owned utilities for something besides capital expenditures as required by Hope and Bluefield, can that displace those performance incentives, displace that remaining 8% return on equity, or does it have to be on top of it?
I think we'd have to do a deep dive in a specific case where we were dealing with it. I would say that the Hope Bluefield standard requires a reasonable range. So there is, it's not as if there's one single magic number that is the right one. So there is flexibility in that range. And so one thing that you could do is to say, look, here's what a competent utility, here's the level of a competent utility, and there's a return that should be associated with that. And then there's a much higher performing utility, and a higher return would be justified if their performance were that much better. And significantly, if a company's not meeting standards, then there should be a downward adjustment of their earnings. So I think there is a fair bit of flexibility. I would note that when we are looking at those performance incentives, and we're a long way from figuring out whether or how to incorporate those in rates. There are a lot of different ways to use those kinds of performance standards. You can use them to construct rules. You can use them as a scorecard to say, okay, this is an A performing utility, a B performing utility, C, and use that to advise the ROE determination in rate cases or otherwise. And then you can have direct consequences, either in terms of penalties or financial incentives. So we're a long way, and I don't want to suggest that we have come to any clarity on what direction to go. But what I do think is important is that we have a conversation about what we want our utilities to do, what we think our utilities should look like in 5-10 years, and chart a path to get us there. I don't think it's enough to simply wait for rate cases to come to us and see how reliability is doing. I want to see, I want to be really thoughtful about what is an appropriate level of reliability that should be provided as a baseline. I want to look at how do we make sure the utilities are advancing legislative policies and very concrete items like integrating distributed resources in a way that is effective for not only the ratepayers, but everybody, all the stakeholders who are involved in that work.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Representative Berry?
No, I'll leave it there. We'll come back to it.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much, Chairman Bartlett, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you all over the course of the session.
Okay. Before we break up, I was wondering, Deirdre, if you could give us a overview of what's coming in our next informational session.
So the committee will be meeting Thursday. You're going to be receiving overviews from Connect Maine Authority, DECD, Commissioner Johnson, the Governor's Energy Office, and Efficiency Maine Trust. And then in the afternoon session, we'll be hearing a briefing on the climate action plan from various presenters, which I don't have all the presenters yet. They haven't sent me that information yet, but I think there's a couple of people that will be providing information on that. And then next week is not settled yet, but we will have at least some more continued orientation. The Public Advocate's Office will be providing some information, and then potentially some stakeholder introductions, but that is not decided or finalized at this point.
Great. So does any committee member have any questions for Deirdre, Ben, or Dan before we move on, before we wrap this up? Great. Well, I want to thank you all for participating. I think it went fairly well. And feel free to call either Trey, Nate, myself, or Seth if you have comments or if you have suggestions on how we can do things better. And we'll see you all on Thursday morning. Thank you.
And just a reminder too that Thursday may be a longer day. We are expecting a presentation in the afternoon, so make sure you're available for that as well.
And don't forget about Wednesday, tomorrow with AFA.
Right.
Yes, if you do want to participate in AFA, you should be getting a link. And if you haven't, just reach out to Ben and get that information.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone.